Hi everyone, I am so excited because I am speaking with author Susan Gloss and we are talking about her newest book. It's right behind her there, The Curiosities, and it came out February 5th. So it's been out for almost a month now and it's getting such great reviews. And you know what, Susan, I've seen this cover like since the beginning of the year and I knew I wanted to read it. Like I saw it everywhere and I'm like, yes, I want to read that book because it's such a fun cover.
Thank you. I have a lot of love for this cover right now, especially because we are just covered in feet of snow here in Wisconsin, where I live. I live in
Oh.
Madison, Wisconsin, and we have just piles of snow and ice. So I just look at the cover and I think, spring, yay, flowers.
You know what? It's funny. I'm in Pennsylvania and it's March 1st
Uh-huh.
when we're recording this. And I woke up this morning and it snowed overnight. And I was like, what?
Oh
No.
man.
I mean, it's not bad. It's not like you.
Yeah.
Okay. But it's like, you don't
Yeah.
want to wake up on March 1st and see snow. I don't want to do that.
Right.
Yeah, it's just so much fun. I see so many dark covers, and when I saw this one, it's like bright and fun, and and this book is fun. I mean, it covers some topics, that are difficult, but for the most part, it's a
Sure.
fun book. And what I wanted you to do, since I didn't read Vintage, but this is very much a standalone, but I want you to catch us up on like their story.
Okay, so you mean in terms of how it links
Uh,
with vintage,
Yeah,
or
because for those of us
okay,
who didn't read Vintage, because I really want to, like, I want to go back and read it now because I want like another story. But for everybody who
sure,
didn't read it, like, I want to know like what
okay,
happened to Nell and Josh like before this.
okay. So Nell and Josh are new characters. They were not in vintage. So this is vintage.
Oh, oh, okay.
Vintage
I
was
didn't know
my
they
first
weren't in
book.
it. I thought it was
No.
okay. Okay.
So the only character, which is why it's they're considered standalone novels, but companion
Okay.
novels because there are the common thread between the two books is that in vintage this one here. In Vintage, Betsy Barrett is a secondary character in Vintage, and she is this wealthy philanthropist who is very much devoted to supporting the arts. And so, and this is not a spoiler alert because it's actually, I mean, by the time you read the Curiosities, that Betsy has passed away. So Betsy dies in Vintage, and she leaves her vast estate to establish a foundation for the arts. And so the Curiosities picks up with that foundation, and the Curiosities is about the artist colony that's run out of Betsy's lakeside mansion that she left behind. So that's the link. And
Okay.
what's fun about it is that vintage Betsy is a secondary character. It's mostly about Violet, the shop owner, and a couple of other characters that work in her shop and come into her shop. And Betsy is one of her customers, but we see quite a lot of her in Vintage, but she really is a secondary character. But then in the Curiosities, because the artist colony is run out of her home, we get glimpses into her past, and there are some chapters told from her point of view, her travels around the world, meeting artists, and so we, in the Curiosities, the title refers to all the items that she's picked up along her lifetime and her world travels and art collecting. And so that's the link between the two books.
Okay.
Um,
I'm sorry
so,
about that. I thought it was.
oh,
I thought when it started, I thought it was like I guess because of how it ended too. Because I really hope you write another one. I really want to know. You have to, right? You got to write another one. Okay. Well, anyway, so I thought it was like their story continued on. So, but you know what? That makes me realize why I loved Betsy's chapter so much. I mean, well, I love Nell. Like, I love her. She's so awesome. But I really enjoyed Betsy's because it was like history put in there,
sure.
and they were
Mm-hmm.
flashbacks. And I thought you did such a great job with those flashbacks. I loved it. And it made that story so much more rich to put in there. So now that I know that, now I know I want to go back and read Vintage.
Yes,
Yeah. Yeah.
she's a
So,
fun
okay,
character.
we cover, in this book, you cover the fact that Nell had a miscarriage, a late term
Yeah,
miscarriage, not just
yeah,
an early,
right.
which is so. I have 6 children. I've never had a miscarriage. So I feel so out
Wow, you're
of
very fortunate.
very fortunate, Very. But I feel like it's almost like if you haven't, you feel like you can't say, like you almost don't have, like when you read about it, I'm like, I don't even have an opinion on what it's like. And you could look at her story and be like, oh my God, I know people who have invested everything. And as an outsider, I'm like, I think I would have found something else to do, but I can't say that because I have like from this perspective where I'm like, yeah, this was fun sometimes, but I could have found other things to do. And
Sure.
it's not fair. You know what I mean? It's not fair that I have that perspective,
So I'm really glad you said that because, the aspect of Nell's story that has to do with infertility and loss, it's not what the book is about. It's an aspect of the book.
Right.
But it was really important to me to portray that accurately. And I wanted it to be so that people who have been through that sort of thing feel less alone because it's something that people don't talk about.
Right.
Because it's a very sensitive topic. And I think it's something that people are starting to talk about more. And so I wanted to, even through fiction, I wanted to make that a little bit more accessible. But then also for people who haven't had that experience to just shed some light on it. Because like you said, how would you know if you have a very different experience? And so my hope was that I could shed some light and maybe build some understanding. Again, even though it's a fictional character, it's something that is very, very common and, very all-consuming for people who are going through those experiences. So,
yes.
So that was, I'm glad that you said that because I really do think that it's something that people can relate to, whether it's to have compassion and understanding, and to see how someone else, what someone else has had to deal with, or just to feel a little less alone and to make it a little bit easier to talk about because people who like to talk about books, maybe talking about something in a book makes them feel more comfortable talking about their own experiences or being there for a friend. So
exactly. And you know what I've noticed, because I am 54, I have children that are 30, okay, and my older children, and I've seen what their generation has done on Facebook is that those women really come out with it because they announce their pregnancies early. And then if something, like we were of the generation, you don't talk about it, very, very tight inner friends know like what is going on with you, but otherwise you don't, broadcast it. But I've seen that the next generation, they're being way more open about it. And I'm really happy about that because as women, it's at least you can share your pain and it's not something to be ashamed of or like struggling or, because Nell struggles with her pain and even with her husband, like, cause that relationship is tough to, cause he's like, let's move on. Let's stop spending money. Let's.
And I think his perspective is a valid one too. And that was something that I really wanted to develop was that tension because I think they both deal with their grief in a different way and both of the ways that they feel are valid. And I think that's, a very realistic challenge that people face. So.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's why I love her because she does, she has secrets. She has
secrets.
She has some secrets.
Some deception.
Yeah, some deception, but you can't blame her, like you feel for her. But I felt like what you did with her throughout the book was I saw her grow. And I love when I read books about women who are, because even though I'm not going through that, I'm going through other things.
Right, absolutely.
So it gives you, and even though she's a different age, and I don't know, when I was reading it, I was like thinking about the things that I'm going through as a parent and grandparent, and like, like just seeing her get stronger. And I was like, I love that. I love those characters that in the beginning, they're so vulnerable, her heart's breaking. And by the end, she like blossoms and then I walk away just smiling and I'm like, okay, Susan has to write the rest of this. Hopefully she's writing this as I'm reading this right now. So are you going to?
Well, I am working on something right now. But I'm being a little tight-lipped about what I'm working on. So.
Okay, we'll just have to wait.
Yes, just have to wait. But that's good to hear. And that, that is something I like writing about strong women and, And you know, and also in the Curiosities, there is a male point of view as well. Odin, one of the artists, so and he has his own, you know, his own struggles he has to overcome. But strong women, that's a huge theme in my two books, and something I know I can tell you one thing is that no matter, you know, no matter when my next book comes out or the specific storyline, it will be about strong women in some sense, because that's really what makes me tick. And I do think that vulnerability is part of being strong, because you know, you can put up a strong front, but um that, you know, it's not real. And so I really do think that that, you know, there is strength in vulnerability and being able to you know, move through something with grace.
Yes. And I know you did all these different points of view, but they were all fun. And I found myself, I mean, I love Nels. And like I said, I love Betsy. Like I don't know. I love her. That's why I'm going back to read that other one. Cause my heart like went out to her, and I was like, and it was so much fun. Like her chapters were so much. Did you have a favorite writing?
Did I have a favorite character?
Yeah. That you love to write. Like, were you happy when you got back to a certain character?
I mean, they all are my children in some sense.
Yeah.
I would say that Betsy may have been a favorite just because I already had written her character in Vintage, and so I got to go and explore her backstory more. And also because she travels, it was really fun to write about different places. And you know, some of which are places I've been to, you know, long ago, or maybe I haven't been to all the places that she talks about and has collected art from, but I got to research some of those places, and so that was fun for me as a writer. I love doing research. So Betsy's story, how it took her kind of around different parts of the globe, I had a lot of fun writing those chapters.
Yeah, and I love the history, because I mean, in my heart, historical fiction, like anything that has history is just,
I love historical fiction.
Yeah, and so like I felt like hers were like kind of historical fiction because you were bringing other places and characters and people she'd run into, so that made it a different fun, you know, element for me, you know.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but there was, you know, like all of these characters grew. I mean, from when they first moved in until the end of the book. So, I mean, that part was fun, reading the different personalities, you know?
Right.
Yeah. So that's why I was like, as I'm reading them, I'm like, I wonder which one she liked the best, because they're all so different, you know, but they all have their little quirks, and then, you know, to get along. It was fun. I love books that are different points of view and multi-character like that, you know, but very strong character based. I love that, you know? It was just one of those.
That's my jam.
That's your thing? Yeah.
That's my jam, yep.
That's your jam. I like that.
Yeah.
So, you start off with Nell in the beginning of the book, like standing at the lake. And I went back and read that this morning before we talked, because I always like to go back to see like where you start. Because I read this book in a day, and then you still forget where you started off. I did. Yeah. I know. I'm crazy. I read it yesterday all day. So that's why I'm still in this book, because that's what I did yesterday. You know,
so real.
Yeah. And when I went back to read it this morning, the first chapter, I love that. I highly suggest people do that. Can't believe I made it this many years without doing that, because then you can see where you started. And I was like, oh my gosh, Susan, this was so brilliant. I completely forgot that you started her off at this specific point. And, you know, like with the bills in her pocket, you know, standing there like with all this. And I have been there. Okay. I have hidden many a bill. So I do get that. I have. My ex-husband would tell you, okay? Like, and even for no reason sometimes, like, just like, you don't want to say. And hers was a little bit more intense, and, you know, like thinking that, you know, like, what am I going to do? And, you know, so when I highly suggest people go back and read that first chapter, because I love that. You know, when I read it this morning, I was like, oh, that was such a good first chapter. And I love a good first chapter.
I love that tip as a reader too, because I'm going to start doing that. I'm going to start looking back at the first chapter again. Not only for my own enjoyment, but I feel like it'll, as a writer, I think I can learn a lot from doing that. Because once you have the whole story and then you go back and read the first chapter, you can see what about it works. So that's and cool.
Yeah, I used to always say, like, first of all, I love your ending, and we don't do giveaways. The ending is absolutely brilliant. I love it. Okay. But when I go back and read that first chapter, my actual last line is then the last line of the first chapter. And I always think it so wraps it up. I'm always like, oh, I am so happy about that. Like, it just makes it one big story. And I started it a little while ago with thrillers because I wanted to see what they did. And then,
Sure.
but it works with anything. It really does. It works with fiction.
Right.
You know, it works with any kind of fiction. And you know, like I said, I read it and then I went back and I'm like, oh, that's right. I like have to remind me, like, oh, that was so brilliant. Is that like, did you start it there? Is that how you started the book off? Did you know that's how you wanted
It's
it?
not.
Oh,
It's not how I started it. At some point in writing, I went back and wrote the opening the way that I did because there's a lot going on when we first meet Nell in her first chapter, and I wanted to give a little snapshot that would leave questions in the mind of the reader. So I went back and I wrote that opening once I was well into writing into the drafting of the novel because by that point I knew which story threads I wanted to give glimpses of. And as a writer, there's always this struggle of how much to reveal and how much to
right,
withhold.
right.
And I don't think I knew that right in the beginning as I was writing her story. And so that was something I added later as I was developing and revising because at that point I had an idea of, how long she was going to keep secrets and exactly, how that was going to play out. So
Yeah, well, I loved it. Thank you so much. I feel, like I love reading books like this because I love mixing it up. I'd been reading a lot of thrillers, so I was like, it's such a nice break,
it's definitely not a thriller, although there is some legal trouble in there.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
just a little bit. I am a lawyer, by training, and I do work part-time as an attorney. And
Oh,
so I work 3 days a week as a staff attorney for an appellate court. And so I do have that legal part of my brain.
yes.
And because a lot of life's problems, they bump up against legal issues. And so, both of my books have a little bit of,
A little bit of,
yeah, I use some of my legal skills, but they're not they're not legal thrillers by any means.
right.
But they're definitely more character driven novels. But it's nice to be able to use that part of my brain as well. So
I was a legal secretary in my before in my life before kids, but actually no, because I worked and had kids and my older children, and I worked for a really large firm down in Washington D.C.
Oh, sure.
And so I do I love. But then when after I raised my kids, I was like, I'll just go back to law. Well, guess what? No legal secretaries. There's no such thing. Computers have taken over legal in my area. I don't know, maybe other areas there aren't, but not here. Like, it's definitely lawyers use their own computers.
And then paralegals too.
And right, I'd have to go to school. And so like all that, what I did before, it's like I was in that generation of things that, you kind of, your job outlives you. You outlive your job, I mean. Exactly. But anyway, that's probably why I liked it too, because I do love that. I love law. It makes it much more interesting. But angle your thing so everybody can see that book again, the cover. It's just there we go. Perfect. So much fun. Thank you so much, Susan. I'm going to have all of her links listed below. I'm also going to have the IndieBound link so you can find it in your local bookstore. And I will have Amazon. You can go get the Kindle today and you can go read it. So thank you.
Over the weekend.
Read over the weekend. That's right. And you know what? I want to, when your next one comes out, like, I want to know. You know where to find me because I want to read it.
All right.
Even if it's not a continuation, but I want it to be.
I'll find you.
Okay. Have a great day, Susan.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.